This podcast is brought to you by Podcast Nation.
If you're a creator and you're considering video, you need to back into what's actually feasible for you. If it's not full video episodes, then find ways to win video in terms of short form and see how your audience responds. Test everything you do for at least 60 days. Don't do it for a week and then be confused by nothing is changing. You need to give it the time.
Welcome to Officially Influenced. I'm your host, Clio de la Llave, founder of Bouge Media and Podcast Nation. This podcast is for creators looking to amplify their message. We're pulling back the curtain on an often mysterious industry to share the insights you need to grow your brand. Let's get into it. Today, I'm joined by Libby, who's our Director of Strategic Growth and Partnerships here at Podcast Nation, and honestly, a big part of how and why we've been able to grow the way that we have. She leads everything from business development to show acquisition to partnerships and spends a lot of her time thinking about how we expand our network, grow audiences, and create real opportunities for our creators. She's joining us today because as she leads strategic growth across our shows, she's been really deep in understanding video, what actually makes sense for different types of podcasts, and how to think about the right platforms to distribute it on a way that's strategic, not just reactive. And let me tell you, there's been a lot of updates regarding video in the industry. Libby, welcome to Officially Influenced.
Thanks, Clio. That was such a nice introduction.
Is this your first podcast?
No, it's not. It is not my first podcast, but it's the most important one by far.
Okay, I'll take that. Okay, Libby. So video is literally everywhere in podcasting right now. It's like the conversation. And something that we say internally is that video can actually break a podcast before it makes it. Mm-hmm. Before we get into tactics, I want to zoom out for a second because I think a lot of creators feel like they have to be doing video right now because that's what everyone's talking about.
Right.
Podcasting is originally an audio form. And so how did we all make this shift toward video? And what's the important context that we need to understand with the shift?
Yeah, of course. Well, as you said, podcasting is a majority an audio first industry, and a large part of our industry still remains that way. When we think back to video, I was actually ruminating on this the other day with some colleagues in the space about how a few years ago in podcasting, when we were talking about video, largely we were talking about it because it was a new monetization channel for a lot of audio first shows. So initially in the industry, when we came from radio into podcasting, obviously a lot of those shows were audio only. And as they were thinking about ways to expand opportunity, it solely came down to like how much you could sell a show for in terms of monetization. We use a CPM structure in podcasting. But in short terms, you could get a higher CPM for a video product than you could for just an audio only product. So in the industry, when we were talking about video, it was largely for the opportunity to make more money. And so every podcast was thinking about video in this way. Now, largely 2 years later, we're not really talking about monetization at all when it comes to video. We certainly are because it limits. When you start doing video, it limits the way we can sell a show, and we can get into that later in the conversation. But largely, when we're talking about video now, the main thing that we talk about with it as a driver for a podcast is not just to make more money, but it's for discoverability and audience growth. And so when we're thinking about video in our industry as a whole, we're thinking about this idea of growing your audience, reaching a new audience, and turning on greater discoverability for your show.
Obviously, you being Director of Strategic Growth ended up taking this on. It's become an actual beast. Now, we will get into it, but Apple Video just launched. There's Spotify Video. Obviously, YouTube is a huge discoverability tool and just massive for podcasts on video. So you've really been digging deep and have spent numerous hours just to try to get all the information for our shows. How would one host or podcaster gather all this or have time to gather all this information? So we just thought it would be so valuable to do a podcast about this. And I really want to pick your brain if you can somehow, end up summarizing everything that you've been learning over the last couple of months. Because I feel like literally on every single one of our meetings, it goes back to this conversation.
Yeah.
Do you think, because I'm assuming a lot of hosts or podcasters are listening to this, do you think that video is necessary for most podcasts today because of all of the hype, or are people overcorrecting?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's a question that we ask ourselves probably every single day. And on our side of the fence as a publisher and network that has a variety of shows on our network that are audio only, video first. There's a few different ways, as you know, creators can come into the space. Sometimes people launch a podcast that is truly just an audio only podcast. When it comes to acquisition, we come across these shows all the time. They have a really strong RSS feed, but maybe not a presence anywhere else. Other times, and more often than not, what we're seeing in terms of acquisition is YouTube creators, TikTok creators, Instagram creators who are coming into the space with that background. And so it makes a lot of sense for a creator like that who owns a bunch of audience on a channel such as YouTube or TikTok or Instagram. It's kind of a no-brainer. Like, you want them to be able to have video with their show. So I think the main thing here is to focus in again on, it's not one size fits all. It would be really great if it was. But obviously, creators, they come from a variety of different channels. And then depending on existing podcasts, where their existing audiences are is also how you want to consider video moving forward.
You often recommend our shows to look at video in different ways. It doesn't just need to be long form content in order to get what you want from this. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, of course. One of the things that we say, which you said already, is video can often break a podcast before it makes it. And what do we really mean by that? Well, a lot of times when we talk to creators about considering video, it kind of feels like an all or nothing conversation. Immediately, you need to run out and buy all this equipment, and you need to start recording all of your episodes on video, and you need to hire a producer, and you need to have an editor, and you need to be doing clips. And it's just such a huge incremental lift that some creators might just be used to because they've been doing video for their whole career, but others aren't. And so you have to consider those factors when thinking about video, but it's not necessarily something that everybody has to do. And we use this as a strategy with our own shows. Of course, we talk to them about going full video episodes straight away. 4 releases a month is not necessarily the best solution for you. Before doing full video, can we on-ramp to that to see if the juice is even worth the squeeze? Can you be doing short form clips? You can record your episodes on video, but can you cut them down and be pushing them on TikTok and pushing them on Instagram or Spotify for creators or Apple Connect or YouTube Shorts? Like, there's all these different ways that you can drive video. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to be doing full blown interviews in person, in a studio with guests, editing and uploading. And that's something that we talk with our shows about all the time. We just recently had a meeting with one of our shows who, in every respect, it felt like the next growth channel for them was video. But when we backed into the actual bandwidth that they had as hosts, it wasn't realistic. And so we've put a different structure into place where we'll incorporate video, certainly, but not to the degree of full production.
To add to that, it's like when you think about, and I'm sure you can all have guessed when Libby's talking about getting all the equipment and the camera and the lighting, that costs a lot of money. Then there's the editing component. Now you're adding not only audio, but you're adding video. So whether it's you that's editing or you're outsourcing it, now you're going to have to pay someone to, or it's like just takes a lot longer to edit because you're needing to edit them simultaneously. But we've had some hosts that are like, I'm just skeptical because honestly, it just takes me that much longer to get ready because you're now on camera and you're putting it on YouTube.
Yeah, even little things like being camera on. Yeah.
Yeah. And that just changes it too, instead of just being in your sweats. And I mean, we still definitely recommend trying to take video for clips and stuff like that, but it does change it. If you're doing video, you want to do it right. And now it's going to be on multiple platforms.
Yeah.
Talking about the platform side, Spotify and Apple have both just made recently big moves into video. And I think that there's a lot of confusion around what that actually means. So, at a high level of what creators should understand, what have Spotify and Apple actually launched when it comes to videos, like to video today?
Yes. At a very high level, Spotify has video on the RSS feed. So, what that means, if you're a podcaster, you should know what that is. But if you're just a general creator, an RSS feed is the technology of where your podcast lives and how it's served to the world. But when you go into your feed on Spotify, if I'm just a consumer and I'm looking at the officially influenced podcast, I can see a feed. And from a consumer standpoint, you should be able to see audio episodes. We're not a video first podcast, but for video podcasts that are utilizing Spotify video, you'll be able to see Spotify video. Similar to Apple, Apple just rolled out this product as of January. So Spotify has had that product out for over a year. Apple just released in January. The difference between Spotify and Apple that's really important to understand is that Spotify is one platform that serves a variety of content. So Spotify, you can go to consume music, you can go to consume podcasts, you can go to consume audiobooks. So you're competing with all of that content in one platform. That being said, Spotify also owns a different variety of companies in the podcasting space, one of them being Megaphone, which is a distribution company. So in order to be on Spotify video, you have to be using Spotify's distribution company, Megaphone, or their other creator platform, which is also a distribution company, Spotify for Creators. So Spotify has a variety of interests in the space that I think is important for us as creators and consumers to understand. Apple is not a distribution company. Apple is a product manufacturing company, but they own Apple Music. They have Apple Podcasts. But what you have to remember is that these are different platforms. So you have your Apple Music app, and then you have your Apple Podcast app, which doesn't host anything besides just podcasts. And now, similar to Spotify, you have video. So when you go to consume a audio podcast, you can opt in to watching video. But the important key factor to remember here with this is that Apple does not own any parts of the distribution process. They want distribution companies to use their platform and to use all the products that are available on it, like Apple Video, but they have less shared interests and motives behind why they would want creators to be on their platform than Spotify does. All that to say, it's very nuanced. Well, the main commonality actually right now with Apple and Spotify video is that it largely affects your ability to monetize. So if you're an existing show and you're already monetizing and you're considering Apple and Spotify video, you need to talk with your monetization partner, whether it's a network or just a monetization platform, to see if it actually makes sense to use these tools because it's different for every show based on how you're being sold. If you're just a podcast that is independent and you're not monetizing and you're doing video, then my suggestion would be distribute everywhere. Go on to do Spotify video. If you can partner with one of Apple's distribution companies, which is not largely accessible to everybody, then do Apple video and then also be doing YouTube because you'll increase your discoverability opportunities. But there's a lot of factors to consider before actually making that move.
And just to maybe paint a picture a little bit, like let's say I am a podcast. I'm currently audio only. I've just gotten into video, but I'm monetizing really well. I'm doing a lot of baked in ads. What are the main things to consider by going on Spotify video as well as Apple video? Just to give a bit of an idea of what that looks like.
If you're an existing show and you're already monetizing.
Yes, I'm raking it in. I have so many ads on my platform. I have a lot of baked in shows.
Yeah. Well, if you're selling baked in, that means that your ads are truly baked into your episodes, then you should be good to go. The big factor here with monetization is dynamic ad insertion. So Spotify has dynamic ad insertion capabilities, which means that when we upload your episode, audio and video, we can place ad markers, and those host read or programmatic ads are filling those spots. The big factor that is difficult with this is that Spotify is a subscription platform that people pay to consume on. That's one of Spotify's main revenue drivers as a company. And the way it's structured is that people who pay for Spotify pay not to hear ads. So you have these stealing from Pete to pay Paul kind of business model in place on Spotify, where they really want to incentivize creators to use Spotify video, but they also have to keep their subscribers who are consumers happy. So they can't allow podcasts to come on their platform and use monetization at free will because it would interfere with their subscribers. So they're constantly, these people at Spotify are constantly walking that line and having to balance those two pieces of the puzzle. All that to say, when you do dynamic ad insertion on Spotify, your ads are actually not heard by people who subscribe to Spotify, which is a huge amount of the audience. There's very few people who are using Spotify for free. So it cuts out your revenue for dynamic ad insertion entirely. So if you're a podcast that relies heavily on dynamic ads, which are ads that can be sold across your whole catalog, then your ability to make the move to Spotify video, if you're thinking of monetization, is little to none. If you are selling baked in, which means that you're just selling episodically, you're selling an ad per an episode because you have enough downloads to do that, then you're just baking it in truly. And Spotify has to turn a blind eye to the fact that you're a podcaster may be baking in their ads and they're still being heard. So that's one thing for Spotify video. For Apple, dynamic ad insertion is not available at all as of right now. It won't be available until later in 2026, Q3 of 2026, Q4 of 2026. So if you're making the move to Apple Video, the only way you can monetize is if you're baking in your ads. You have no capability. The technology is not there to dynamically insert. But when it is there, it will be heard by everybody because Apple Podcasts is for free. There's no subscribers. So Apple doesn't have the same roadblocks that Spotify has when it comes to being able to serve consumers and creators at the same time.
Interesting, right? So like right now, it's still like it's rolling out. There's going to be different phases. As a network, we've always seen the upside of being an early adopter when these large platforms roll out a new feature like this, because then you're getting ahead of the curve. And like, hopefully these big platforms are pushing you out because there's just a lot less competition. What do you have to say to that, especially when it comes to Spotify video and Apple video?
Yes, you hit the nail on the head. So we call that share of voice on a platform, which when you're an early adopter, simply put, simple math, there's less share of voice. So you have more opportunity to be the first to market in terms of having your content be discovered and being a creator on the platform who is using these tools when not a lot of others are. That being said, the best way to think about these platforms, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, is that they have their own algorithm. Every type of product that is being developed right now, largely in part, has discoverability attached to it. So even if we're thinking outside of podcasting, just think about shopping on Amazon and how when you open up the Amazon app, you're being showed all sorts of suggestions for the type of content that you would like, type of shoes you want to buy. Maybe you want this kind of trash bag. Maybe you want this household cleaner. If you open up your news app, it's showing you the type of articles that you want to read. Everywhere we go, discoverability is being pushed into a consumer's eyes and ears. Podcasting is no different. Apple, Spotify, and YouTube are no different. And there's algorithms behind this type of consumption habits that they're seeing on their platforms. And so if you're a creator and you came from digitally native background like TikTok or Meta, the more that you use TikTok's features, the more you use Meta's features when you're posting your content, the more you would see that your content is being pushed into the algorithm. It's the same way with Apple and Spotify, and YouTube. YouTube has endless amounts of tools for creators. Spotify and Apple are rolling out more and more. The more you will see your content being pushed into discoverability platforms. That being said, these innovations that Apple and Spotify are rolling out are huge moves for them. Apple hasn't had an exciting announcement when it comes to podcasting for years. And so they're doing a large amount of marketing and editorial around podcasts that are utilizing these features. So if you're backed by a network, then you can work with your partner reps, either companies, Spotify, Apple, or even YouTube, to leverage your move into video to get editorial features on their platforms. But you also don't have to be with a network to see this. I read an article this morning in Pod News about a podcast that was with a network, but they went into video as a net new podcast. So it just launched and they were featured randomly. So they weren't working with an Apple rep on this, but they were featured randomly in Apple's editorial on the app. And in one day, they saw an incremental lift of 61,000 downloads. And their team did nothing to garner that for them. They just simply were a video podcast on the app. So the opportunity is really immense for any show right now to be using Spotify and Apple Video. As more people onboard to the platforms, it's going to be less and less, obviously, because now you're competing with that share of voice. But as an early adopter, you hit the nail on the head. There's so much that you can garner in terms of discoverability and hopefully editorial lift to drive audience consumption.
And then on the other side, obviously, YouTube isn't a new player in the space. And podcasting in YouTube, I feel like just blew up even in just like the last year. It's obviously been longer, but it really did blow up so quickly. Let's say like a podcaster really wants to focus on one platform.
Yeah.
Would you still recommend that to be YouTube? Or what are the benefits of YouTube versus the other? Not that it has to be one or the other, but how do you look at YouTube in the podcasting space?
Yeah, YouTube is the legacy platform when it comes to video. So largely in part, I haven't had experience working with a podcast that is already doing video that isn't on YouTube. Maybe that will start to change. But I think if you're already cutting video episodes, you would just be putting them on YouTube because, again, there's no barrier to entry when it comes to monetization. And that structure in our industry for how to monetize YouTube is already in place. Whereas with Apple and Spotify, our industry as a whole, every aspect from publisher to network to creator to advertiser to data analyst is trying to figure out how to make the pieces of the puzzle work together. And with Apple and with Spotify video. So I think it just makes sense naturally that if you're a video podcast, you're distributing on YouTube and then you're considering with a little bit more caution these other platforms like Apple, Spotify, and then eventually here in the next quarter, so we're sitting Q2 of 2026, Amazon Music will be rolling out video distribution as well. And we'll start to see this more and more with all sorts of platforms. But it just depends if the ability to monetize is there. If you're not worried about monetization, then you can kind of throw pasta at the wall everywhere. But I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of as a strategy for a show, it's really hard to focus on all of those buckets at one time. And very likely, you can't really understand the analytics when you do focus on all of the platforms at one time. It's really difficult to understand the data. So if I'm releasing on Apple and Spotify video, then I'm having to look at where did that spike actually come from in my downloads? Was it Apple? Was it Spotify? Whereas if you're testing a channel for at least 60 days is what we recommend our network, then you can see, okay, I did this and this works. It's just easier from a standpoint if you're just a creator and you don't have a full team behind you to understand where lift is happening.
There's so much strategy, especially now that there's a lot of platforms. And this is where we really try to empower hosts to really think about their podcast as a business, right? And so if you roll out one platform at a time, you can kind of see like where there was a lift and look at the analytics and kind of understand where your audience mostly lives or what platform are they most engaged, which I think is such valuable information.
Right.
Something too that we get, and this is a bit of a side note, but when we have an audio podcast that is doing really well, sometimes they're a bit skeptical of then going on YouTube because a lot of them say, well, am I going to divide my audience? And what we've really noticed is that they're very different listeners. Someone who's going to watch a podcast is a different listener than someone who's just going to listen. Like, I'm a prime example. I will never go on YouTube to watch a podcast. I'm an audio listener podcaster, so I think that that's a prime example of how these platforms really do lend to discoverability to new audiences. And that's almost like one of the best ways. And I'm sure it'll be the same with then going on Spotify. Like, some people will they're already on the app, they're Spotify users, and they don't go on YouTube that much. That's a really good way of looking at it, but it doesn't all need to be done at once. And you have to just learn about what these different platforms offers, what the limitations are, and then really think about what's best for you and then try things out. If you launch on Apple Video, doesn't mean you have to release on Apple Video forever. If it doesn't end up working out, you can also change your strategy too.
It's not forever. And we recommend testing everything. We're constantly testing on our side to see what actually makes sense. Again, it's not one size fits all.
Totally. Well, on that note, let's zoom out again, because I think a lot of people do ask themselves, and that there's this underlying question that with all this video talk, with all these new platforms, big companies launching video, do you think that video will ever replace audio in podcasting?
I don't think so. I don't. I mean, there's
I don't either.
Data to prove it that we back into all the time, but there's a metric that 92% of podcast consumption is still listeners, and only 8% of consumption is people who watch. That being said, 72% of new podcast listeners say that they only went to the audio only version of a podcast after first discovering it on video. So this again drives home the major point, which is that
very
video,
interesting.
when we're talking about it in the space right now, is for discoverability. It's not for your existing audience. You are right when you say that your existing audience, if you're an audio only podcast, is largely in part going to stay only listening to you on audio, regardless if you put video right in front of them or not. It's just their consumption habit. They are audio listeners. I'm the same way. And somebody who consumes on YouTube and is either watching it on their desktop or their phone or their TV, is not going to be somebody who's going to go look you up on Spotify after and listen to your audio only version. They might, but our assumption is that more than likely they won't, because these are different audiences that you're carving out on different platforms, and you might be distributing the same content to them on different platforms, or you might get smart and strategize and distribute different content to them, catering to the different tools that are available. But largely in part, it's different audiences in different places. And because of that, I just don't think that audio consumption is going away. I think you have people who tried and true like to listen to audio, and it will stay that way as long as we continue to serve quality content in audio. I think there's, some arguments to be made for these innovations with video disrupting the quality of audio. There's like audio purists in the industry who have a hard time with these innovations that are rolling out that are just pulling audio from video, and they're not a different edit or a different cut or production of the podcast. So we'll see, we might see a quality hit in terms of what is available on audio, but I don't ever see audio being replaced fully by video.
I totally agree. And those are really interesting stats, and I think it's understanding where listeners are at this stage and also how people are finding new podcasts. I just think the reason podcasts got so big is because you can do it in a way when you're like traveling, when you're on a plane, driving. Mm-hmm. It's just easier to just listen on your headphones than be watching a video.
Yeah, it's a very passive experience for sure.
Well, this is one of those moments where it really is easy to chase trends. I think the smartest creators are the ones who stay strategic, who understand their podcast, who understand it's their business. And Libby, I just wanted to thank you so much for coming on today and sharing all the things that you've learned over the last couple of months. I know you're very active on LinkedIn. You're a LinkedIn girly at the Podcast Nation. So I'm sure if anyone has a question, maybe that would be the best place for them to ask you. Or is there anything else, like as we kind of close the podcast that you're like, oh, this is something else I think would be really valuable that I've learned recently that would be something good to touch on? Or do you think we kind of covered it mostly?
I mean, I think if you're a creator and you're considering video, I think it's the right consideration to make, but you need to back into what's actually feasible for you. If it's not full video episodes, then find ways to win a video in terms of short form and see how your audience responds. I would say test everything you do for at least 60 days. Don't do it for a week and then be confused by nothing is changing. You need to give it the time. But if it is in your wheelhouse to start distributing full video episodes, or you might already be doing this as an independent creator, I would start distributing on some of these channels. YouTube is obviously the easiest, first and foremost one. Spotify becomes the second easiest because it's really easy to create a Spotify for Creators account or a Megaphone account and start doing Spotify video. Apple gets a little bit more complicated, but it won't be complicated for long. So maybe just pause on Apple. If you're a creator that's with a network and you're doing video, then I think you need to have these conversations with your network, if you're not having them already, about what makes sense for you. Is it going into video? Is it doing YouTube? Is it doing Spotify? Is it doing Apple? How does that affect my monetization? What do I earn in terms of discoverability or audience growth? Those are questions that you deserve answers to. And so if you're not already in discussion with your network about it, then you should be. And I would just empower a creator to take the reins on thinking about all of those things and seeing what makes the most sense for them.
Libby, how much are you loving modeling all of our shows? Essentially what Libby's been doing is, just seeing like, okay, how much is a show right now currently selling baked in dynamically? If you were to move to platforms, then what does that mean in terms of your revenue loss for dynamic ads? And would that move make sense or not? So it's like, if you are with a network, just ask them to do that. They probably might already be doing that, but just to truly understand what is that smart next right move for you.
Yes. I was wondering when I became a data analyst overnight. I was like, how did this become a part of my job?
Yeah. You're like, what is this?
Yeah, so worth it.
Yeah. Thank you for all of that work. I really appreciate it because then that meant I didn't have to do it. So you are the best. Great. And thanks, Libby. And I think that's truly such good advice for anyone listening today. So hope you got a ton of value. And Libby, you'll have to come back again once all of this is, I bet you in a year, in 6 months ago, it's going to be so different. And then there'll be a whole new update and this will be already archaic.
Yes. Let's hope it's a little bit longer, but probably not.
Yeah. Let's hope for at least a year. Okay. Thanks again, Libby.
Thanks, Clio.
Next week, I'm sitting down with Ilana Dunn, host of Seeing Other People, who is on the Podcast Nation network. And she's one of the most honest and insightful voices in the dating and relationship space right now. We talk about everything from modern dating dynamics to how she's built real influence through vulnerability, consistency, and actually connecting with her audience, not just growing it. We also get into how she's turned those conversations into a powerful brand and podcast that people genuinely trust. If you're thinking about influence differently, whether that's in your content, your business, or your relationships, you won't want to miss this one. Make sure you're following the show so you don't miss it, and I'll see you next week.